Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, Maintaining the IT Transformation Momentum, sponsored by Leidos on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Angie Heisey, the Civil Group President for Leidos, Dave Shive, the Chief Information Officer at the General Services Administration, Margie Graves, the Acting Federal Chief Information Officer, and Rod Turk, the Acting Chief Information Officer at the Commerce Department. Now, before break, we were talking about this idea of transformation and how's it kind of been running through each agency. And Margie, from your perspective, the broad perspective, we brought up the MGT Act, Modernizing Government Technology Act. That's working its way through Congress. It passed the House. Tell us, Margie, give us as much as an update as you can with what's happening in the Senate.
Well, we're preparing right now to operate as if. And what I mean by that is we're operating as if it is going to pass. It shows very promising signs at this point. We are working through the legislative conversations that we have between our Leg Affairs area and the Hill. We're getting requests for technical assistance, so there are questions that are being answered as we speak. We expect that it will probably get some consideration after the August recess.
So a couple months away still, which is good.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, agencies have to prepare. So
agencies do have to prepare, and we have to prepare at OMB, and particularly for the staffing of the board and for the mechanics of how the board is actually going to work, and GSA is going to be one of our partners in that endeavor. And what we've done is we've stood up an initiative to run a MOC board. We are including individuals that have expertise in financial management, in procurement, as well as technology. And we have had the first kickoff meeting with that group of individuals. They have brought their expertise to the table, and what we want to glean from that is how would we actually run the board? For example, what kinds of proposals would we expect to see? How would we expect to see them? What kind of data analytics should we put behind those, and the business cases to support them that would effectively allow the senior executives on this board to look across the landscape and the number of proposals that we receive and do the trade-offs and make the choices that are most appropriate for the next dollar to be most effective. As you know, we have a certain amount of money that's in the President's budget. The expectation is that we need to use that very judiciously, because this is the flywheel. We're going to get the flywheel started, and it's going to provide momentum. It is not by any means, nor do we call it out as being the answer to all problems. What it is it's an uplift, and it's an addition to the equation that's going to allow people to get started. And we're hoping what people will do is they will see it as an element of their overarching funding strategy. So, for example, we would not expect it to to be the programmatic modernization that you would see, for example, in an FAA or in a Census 2020. But what it will be is it will be an addition to the equation to allow them to adopt certain services, to migrate to certain centralized services, to software as a service, or to utilize as an addition to the equation.
So my little antenna went off, my reporter antenna went off as you talk about the MOC board. Can you just go over a little bit more about that in terms of, is it people from across the government? Is it mostly OMB folk right now? Who's making it up? And then when you run through it, do you actually have a real case study that you're talking about, or is it just a group of people in a room who are kind of talking through the issues as it may happen?
Yeah. It is from across the federal government. We've asked for agency participation as well as some entities from OMB. I said it was multidisciplinary, so we've already stated that. We're also talking to outside entities like venture capitalists. We haven't reached out yet, but as soon as we get the first input from our government executives, we're going to go out to venture capitalists and say, how do you look at different investments that you are looking at in terms of the trade-offs, and which would you choose? So the elements of the criteria are going to be adjudicated within that process. The expectation is that by the time we get to the actual launching of the board, that will have walked through what those business cases look like. And yes, we are going to use true business cases and run it as if we were actually operating the board as this experiment goes forward.
Very interesting, very cool. I'd love to, obviously, when you get closer to that VC discussion, I'm sure a lot of us would be interested to learn more about it. One of the key central pieces of the MGT Act is agencies would create working capital funds in agencies. And as I've talked about before, several agencies already have them. GSA is one of those. Commerce is one of those. So let me start with Dave from GSA. Talk a little bit about how this concept, this idea of the MGT and creating working capital funds, you guys are already in many ways doing.
Sure. So the construct of MGT, it's pretty well known. It makes a lot of sense. On the revolving fund side, it makes sense that there would be a capital investment in legacy and high-risk programs. There will be great value derived out of that. On the working capital fund concept side, it makes a lot of sense as well and can be a true transformation catalyst for federal government agencies. GSA has been operating out of working capital fund for years now, and it was actually key to our transformation play that we started back in late 2011. Through strong leadership in our front office and strong leadership with our contributing business units who contribute into that working capital fund to create a shared service IT delivery mechanism, we gained a couple of things. One, we set aside some money out of that working capital fund for transformation. And we garnered agreement with the executives, the business owners within GSA, that if there were realized savings through those transformation plays, that we could reinvest those into additional transformation plays rather than taking that money and giving it back through bill relief to the participating businesses of GSA. And that was key. That's what allowed us to do that transformation play again and again and again. Now, the returns from a financial standpoint, they get smaller each time. You can't do that play indefinitely, but what we've found is a typical agency like GSA can do it effectively over a 5-year period and gain 19 or 20% cost savings and deliver better IT value and mobile enable your workforce and drive stuff to the cloud and use technology as an enabler rather than just a commodity to be cut over time.
The key to that is understanding where you're starting from, right? If you don't know your as-is, you can't get to your to-be. I always have to throw in a little bit of architecture in any of our discussions. Did you guys have that baseline? Did you know what the Federal Acquisition Service or Public Building Service was paying for email before you moved it to the cloud, as an example?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I'll push back on your original comment just a little bit.
You know, like my enterprise architecture?
Yeah, well, we intuitively know that maybe IT investments are not 100% well spent. And so doing an analysis to get a baseline is a good body of work to do, but I don't think it should be a showstopper, and it certainly shouldn't preclude work from starting. That said, we did do a fair amount of backward looking into the IT spend throughout the organization. This was before we were a consolidated IT shop, so we had pockets of IT running all throughout the organization. Our visibility backwards, the further back you got, was a bit dimmer, but there was some things you could know. So we were able to work a pretty decent baseline, probably 80% confidence off of that. But that's good enough to make good executive decisions. Going forward, we immediately started zero-based budgeting. People will, argue the value of zero-based budgeting in the federal government all day long. We saw great value. We measured where every single dollar directed towards IT was spent and in support of IT delivering its mission. And with that kind of very, very clear view, that's how we're able to measure our savings over time.
Rod, you guys had a similar experience. You guys also have a working capital fund of sorts. Talk about Commerce's experience.
Absolutely. I'd like to start off, though, with a couple of comments about MGT, which I think there's going to be a couple of, at least two in my mind, unintended consequences, if you will, or maybe they are intended, I don't know, but as the MGT moves forward. The first of which, as Margie mentioned, that this is a multidisciplinary effort. She mentioned that there's going to be financial review, there's going to be procurement review, then of course the technology review. And what that tells me is that we're looking at a multidisciplinary approach to IT projects, which I think is something that we really, 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 really need. This is not science projects. This is not, getting in there and doing something really, really cool in the technology area and then looking for a home for it. This is something where the business is going to have to come together, along with procurement, along with the technology folks, the financial folks, and craft a serious, serious program that, driving that then to success. I think the other piece is that in a working capital fund, you will have to pay this money back eventually, right? So what I think that's going to drive us towards are significant progress or projects that are going to save us money. Because in order to pay back that money for the investment we're making in that project, saving money then will be the source by which you then pay that money back for the organization. So I think it's going to be a multidisciplinary approach. I think it's going to be a cost savings effort throughout the federal government, and I'm looking forward to see where all of that goes as this moves forward. Working capital fund, we do have a working capital fund at the Department of Commerce. We've had some tremendous successes in utilizing our working capital fund for shared services kinds of projects within the department. These are projects that are used by every component. They contribute to the payment process for these projects. Two of them come to mind that are significant. One is our implementation of CDM. So, we've implemented CDM, we put the clients on all the desktops, and all of that is run through our working capital fund. I get to brief the CFOs, the CIOs on a regular basis on the progress of where this is all going and what the costs are and how those costs fit into the budgetary process, frankly. And it is a multidisciplinary approach. It's financial, it's procurement, it's technology, and it benefits from that level of scrutiny across all those disciplines. The second major shared service that we're using the working capital fund for is our Enterprise Security Operations Center that we have currently co-located with NOAA out in Fairmont, West Virginia. Our Enterprise Security Operations Center is a 24/7 operations center that utilizes the feeds from each of our components, the cybersecurity feeds from all of the tools, SIM tools, and the other tools that they have in the cyber arena, in addition to the feeds that we're going to get from CDM. And this is also an enterprise security, an enterprise shared services program that I think have brought tremendous benefits to the Department of Commerce. And we expect to use the working capital fund for additional kinds of programs similar to those.
Margie, I want to go to Angie, but before I do that, Margie, I want you to jump in real quick. I always love when a plan comes together, if you will. Remember the A-Team, the idea that FITARA started the process. I mean, you go even further back, but FITARA started the process of creating the CIO at the table. And I get tired of using that term, I guess, so maybe I should stop. But this idea that IT has to be multidisciplinary, and then you have MGT who comes in as Rod's point and your point. It can't just be the CIO making decisions. It's got to bring people in. Is that done on purpose? I always wonder that. Does someone think that far in advance, or is it just logical? It's evolution.
I think it was done on purpose. And it was done primarily because I think there's a recognition that a business executive is multidisciplinary. And this is a business problem that we're trying to solve. We're solving it with technology, but ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to focus on the end game, which is how do we deliver effective citizen services and how do we deliver our mission behind the lines. So the expectation of the citizen in the United States is that all of those are going to be done well, and they're going to be done in the way they're used to seeing them done in the commercial sector, with that kind of speed, with that kind of alacrity, with that kind of user friendliness, with that kind of outcome, positive outcome. So our play here is to use these mechanisms to move us into that realm within the federal government. And it took us a while to get here, and it will take us a while to work our way out of this. And I want to say that I'm hopeful that we can also use the reform executive order while agencies are looking at the complete reimagining of their mission space and their business. Can they use MGT and other mechanisms that we're putting in place to actually help them execute that change? And if we do that, then we have succeeded.
Angie, you were nodding your head a lot. Let's react to what you've heard and where's industry's role in this MGT discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a lot of business with customers that have working capital funds, and so we definitely see the flexibility of that. We've helped GSA with their cloud implementation, and so for us, it's exciting, and we want to understand how we can play a role to help our customers, help them in several ways. Right? They're going to need data so that they can make sure that their business cases are strong when they go to the board. But probably more importantly, I think we can play a role of giving them confidence that it's actually going to deliver the out-year value that they need. Not only value from a mission perspective, but value from a savings perspective, as Rod mentioned, because that's going to have to be paid back. And they're going to want some level of confidence that that can be paid back within a couple years.
You mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that Leidos is not only helping federal agencies and other customers, you're internally too. How difficult from an internal standpoint or from what you're seeing with your federal customers is getting that baseline? I mean, Dave and I may have a little different opinions, and I trust Dave's much smarter than me. But again, you don't know where you're going unless you know where you've been or something.
Yeah, so I think, to Dave's point, which I agree with, is how much time do you spend getting that baseline, right? So when is good enough? And most of our clients, you have to snap that chalk line at some point, right? And so determining exactly what your baseline is good enough. And I think for all of us that are, most of us are exposed to IT every single day, we know that it transforms the way we do business. We know it transforms our personal lives. And so there are some other benefits that other than just what you're going to be able to calculate from the baseline. And so getting that to good enough, I will tell you for us, especially with the massive merger that we just did, we have a baseline, right, that we measure everything against and what value we're creating with all of our transformation projects.
I know, Dave, we could talk all day about zero-cost budget, zero-based budgeting. That's like risk management or something. But we're going to take a break instead and not torment people with our conversation. You're listening to panel discussion, Maintaining the IT Transformation Momentum, sponsored by Leidos on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.